middle of the page, Prime Minister, the fact that there were buses of Chinese-speaking people at the nomination meeting did not necessarily corroborate the allegation that the PRC was responsible. And in fact, I should have read you the sentence before as well. He, meaning you, Prime Minister, also remembered that the intelligence was only an allegation, included no evidence that the people being bused to polls were supported by PRC officials, right? And you go on to say, Prime Minister, that you remembered asking whether the service understood that busing is part of the nomination process. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And again, going back to the reporting I just showed you, there's obviously a reference to busing there. But what I want to suggest to you is that the emphasis, again, wasn't on the mode of travel for these people. They took buses this time, all right. They could have come some other way, and it wouldn't terribly matter for the services perspective because their concern was that they were directed by PRC and assisted in getting to the nomination place in order to, allegedly, help one candidate over another. So the way they go out there doesn't matter one way or another. I understand your point that you wanted to make sure that CSIS understood that buses per se are not a problem. But my proposition to you, sir, is that when you read that statement, the emphasis is on direction by China. Yes, they got there by buses. That's the allegation. They could have got there by tricycles. It doesn't terribly matter. The point is they were directed by China.
I would suggest that it might be more difficult for a foreign actor to organize fleets of individuals showing up on tricycles rather than filling them into a bus.
I expect that's right. But one way or another, let's say they managed that miracle, CSIS would still be concerned, and rightly so.
Absolutely.
Yes. All right. I would like to take you to the David Johnson report for a moment now. That's at COM 104. And if you'll go to page 23, please. Now, I forgot that this is in 2 columns, so I'm not sure where I'm going to find my quote. Let me read it to you. I don't think it's controversial. You may recall that Mr. Johnson, and I hope we can find it in here somewhere, but Mr. Johnson concluded in respect of the Don Valley North allegations. He said, quote, "There is a well-grounded suspicion that the irregularities were tied to the PRC consulate in Toronto." Do you recall that, sir? I can try to find it for you if you don't. One moment.
Yes, there it is. Irregularities were observed.
Yes, and then there we are. And there is, thank you very much, Prime Minister, and there is a well-grounded suspicion that the irregularities were tied to the PRC consulate in Toronto. That's what I wanted to ask you about. Now, I fully appreciate, sir, that that was not a conclusion you were able to make or prepared to make in September 2019. But my question for you is today, now that we've had Mr. Johnson's report and he's come to that conclusion, do you accept, first, that there were irregularities in that nomination contest, and secondly, that they were likely tied to the PRC consulate in Toronto?
I'd suggest that irregularities being observed is not itself enough to overturn a democratic event. And I'd also suggest that a well-grounded suspicion is certainly warranting more reflection and follow-ups, but also might not hit the necessarily very high threshold for overturning the result of a democratic event.
Yes, but I don't think that's what Mr. Johnson is speaking to. He's just saying that there is a well-grounded suspicion that the irregularities, which he seems to have found, were tied to the consulate. And what I want to know is, do you accept those conclusions today?
Yeah, sorry, if you're not asking me about how I accept that there is a suspicion that PRC officials in Canada were engaged in some way with that nomination. I can't speak to irregularities. Perhaps you know what irregularities specifically Mr. Johnston was talking about?
No, not as well as some people in this room. All right. Well, you do accept, though, and you say that there's a suspicion. Do you accept that it's well-grounded? That was Mr. Johnston's view.
I can't speak to analysis made by others. I certainly, and again, distinguishing what I knew in 2019 from what I may have learned later leaves me in an awkward position around answering this.